You got it? Oh, you
Yes.
okay?
Yes, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good
So,
afternoon.
so a rainy afternoon, but for a very important subject matter. I'm Congresswoman Yvette Clark of the Ninth District of New York, representing South and Central Brooklyn. At this stage, I'm going to move our agenda forward by introducing the chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus. Today's press conference is being hosted by the Congressional Black Caucus in conjunction with the Caribbean Caucus, the Haiti Caucus, and the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. As you can see, there is unanimity and unity among members with regard to what we have all witnessed in terms of the Haitian migration and the Haitians that are seated on the southern border. Having said that, it is now my honor to introduce the chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congresswoman Joyce Beatty of Ohio.
Thank you so much to everyone that's gathered here, to the press, to all the representatives of the caucuses that Congresswoman Yvette Clark mentioned. It's not by happenstance that we are here. The nation has witnessed over the last 48 hours some of the most horrific things that we've seen. Some of the most emotional, deplorable, unthinkable, and almost not real for us in 2020. But the real reality is it was real. Today I had the honor of taking 8 members of the Congressional Black Caucus and leadership directly to the White House. And part of that was to speak to those deplorable photos and ask, one, that all those recognized riding horses, using their reins to chase down Haitians like they were cattle and goats, to be suspended, terminated. We also asked a halt to that procedure. While we respect using horses along the border for safety, for patrolling, we have never witnessed people who look like me to be treated the way those Haitians were. We had a long laundry list. And for the sake of so many people who are speaking, we will make it available to the press. We asked for a full investigation. We had the opportunity to speak with the senior advisor to the president, former Ambassador Susan Rice, the chief of staff to Vice President Harris, and to a whole team of the National Security Office. We filled the room, and let me just say, we were not bashful. We put out a set of demands. We said that there would be follow-up. Had the opportunity to spend over an hour with the U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security. We also have asked that the conditions be looked in. How can you send someone from Central America, whether it's Brazil or whether it's Chile, that has not been to Haiti in a decade or more and drop them off? I don't need to tell you, we know of the earthquakes, we know of the assassination, we know of the unrest, and that it is a failed country. Not acceptable to us as the Congressional Black Caucus. Let me stop here and just say to you, we are fully engaged. We had a member from our Congressional Black Caucus in the Texas delegation. We had the chair of our foreign affairs. We had the vice chair of our Homeland Security. We had the first vice, the Congressional Black Caucus. I am just so pleased that we were able to go and lay out our guidelines. Thank you, and I'm going to yield back to Congresswoman Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And let me take this opportunity to ask the co-chair of the House Caribbean Caucus, the Honorable Maxine Waters, to bring her comments at this time. Congresswoman Waters.
Thank you. I want to thank Yvette Clark, and I want to thank Ms. Beatty for the leadership that they're providing on this issue. I'm pissed. I'm unhappy, and I'm not just unhappy with the cowboys who were running down Haitians and using their reins to whip them. I'm happy with the administration. We are following the Trump policy. He is the one that does not follow the Constitution and would not allow those seeking refuge to be able to petition to get into the country. What the hell are we doing here? What we witnessed takes us back hundreds of years. What we witnessed was worse than what we witnessed in slavery. Cowboys with their reins again whipping black people, Haitians, into the water where they're scrambling and falling down when all they're trying to do is escape from violence in their country. Yes, it is unfortunate that it is the poorest country in this hemisphere. It is unfortunate that they have no stable government right now. It is unfortunate that they've had to live through earthquakes. I've been working with Haitians for 30 years. I've been working through 2 coups d'etats. I went to the Central African Republic and I brought back Aristide after he was exiled into the Central African Republic. They have always been between Canada and France and the United States treated worse than anybody else. And so, yes, we are here and we're organized and we're saying to the president and everybody else, you got to stop this madness. And I want to know in the first place, who's paying these cowboys to do this work? They've got to be gotten rid of. They've gotten to be stopped. It cannot go on. And so I thank all of you for being here today. Write the story. Tell the story about what is going on. And let people know that they're trying to take us back to slavery days and worse than that. And the children who are unfortunate to be in this situation must be allowed into the United States immediately. Not tomorrow, not next week, not next month, but immediately.
Yeah.
Oh, I need the book.
Oh. Oh, shit.
Oh. Well, order. It's okay, we good.
Get your next co-chairs.
I am.
There you go.
There it is.
Yeah.
So we made it through the rain, everyone. But the rain is not going to stop us from this press conference today. It's now my honor to bring forward one of the co-chairs of the Haiti Caucus, Congressman Andy Levin.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, all the leaders of the Congressional Black Caucus, and all my colleagues who are here today. To stand united and to say that the treatment of Haitian migrants at our southern border is unacceptable, that Congress won't stand for it, and that we demand accountability and answers and a fundamental change of policy. Since there's so many of us up here who are so outraged, I will be brief. We founded the Haiti Caucus because it's time for a new policy towards Haiti where our country actually sees the overwhelming majority of Haitians who want a Haitian-led solution to the political crisis in Haiti, and we are bound and determined to achieve that. But I have to say, as someone who's been active on justice for Haitian people for 40 years, that Haitian migrants have been treated differently than others for decades. Haitian migrants and Cuban migrants were treated completely differently for many, many years. And now we have 8 or 10, 12,000 Haitians under a bridge, desperate at our southern border. And I challenge any of you to find a picture from another time where American law enforcement officials were riding horses and charging at migrants and using their reins as whips and so forth, what we saw there. I'm just going to be honest with y'all. This would not happen if this was not 8 or 10,000 black people. It is outrageous. We are not going to accept it. And we are here to say to our friends in the Biden administration, we must find a new course of justice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy. Another co-chair of the Haiti Caucus, who has a very substantial Haitian American population within her constituency in Boston, is Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley.
Thank you, Congresswoman Clark, for bringing us all here together. As co-chair of the House Haiti Caucus and proud representative of the third largest representation of the Haitian diaspora in the country, we have been organizing for months to bring attention to the plight of the Haitian people and the needs of the Haitian diaspora during this tumultuous time. Proud to stand here in solidarity with the Congressional Black Caucus and other allies. The Tri-Caucus is represented here today as well, as we speak out against the cruel, the inhumane, and the flat-out racist treatment of our Haitian brothers and sisters at the southern border. We cannot and we must not look away in this moment. The nation of Haiti is in the midst of overlapping crises, the COVID-19 pandemic, a devastating earthquake that killed thousands, and political instability from the assassination of the president. It is an unprecedented humanitarian crisis, one that demands a humanitarian response. But instead of leading with compassion and grace, these families have been met with cruelty. ICE has resumed deportation flights to Haiti. Reportedly, babies under the age of 3 have been on those flights. Families fleeing a humanitarian crisis, seeking a better life in the United States, have been rounded up like cattle, whipped, handcuffed, and detained, sent back to a country where many families have nothing left, where the government lacks the ability and resources necessary to safely receive its citizens, where large swaths of the country are without power or clean water. This is abhorrent. We can and we must do better. The Biden administration must halt these deportation flights and allow folks to make a legal asylum claim, which, by the way, is a human right and legal. Last week, Representative Velasquez and I led more than 50 of our House colleagues in calling on DHS to immediately halt these deportations and do everything possible to support those fleeing the violence on the island. We have a moral obligation to lead with compassion, and the images we've seen of Haitians waiting in tent camps to make an asylum claim, which is a legal right, is a reminder of that. Haitian lives are Black lives, and if we truly believe that Black lives matter, then we must reverse course. The Biden administration must immediately and indefinitely halt all deportations of Haitian migrants. It must affirm and guarantee the right to due process for those seeking asylum, and it must use every resource available to support those fleeing this humanitarian crisis on the island. We are the United States of America. We have the capacity to do this right. We simply need the political will to get it done. In the meantime, Congress must do the work of investigating and ensuring accountability of the egregious and white supremacist behavior of Border Patrol agents in Del Rio, Texas. I serve on the Oversight Committee, and today my colleagues and I, we are demanding answers and an urgent briefing from CBP about the conduct of its agents on the border. And we will continue our work in the Haiti Caucus to champion aid for the region and support Haiti's full economic and political recovery, Haitian-led by civil society. So I thank you once again, Congresswoman Clark, for your steadfast leadership, for convening us all here today. And now we will hear from our partner and our leader, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas.
Thank you so very much, and thank you to Chairwoman Clark. Thank you to Chairwoman Beatty. Thank you to the voices that you have heard, because these are not new voices. These are voices that have been steadfast. Thank you to the Haiti Caucus and all of the co-chairs, and as well my Texas colleagues, Congresswoman Escobar and Congresswoman Garcia. We, as the Congressional Black Caucus, are the conscience and the defenders of black people in the United States and black people around the world. We are their strength and barrier. And so let me thank the chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus for being able to join her at a meeting at the White House where I think the ultimate decisions and representation of where we are had to be made. I do want to say that they were sensitive and responsive and listening, and we're going to continue to fight. But let me tell you why we have the credentials to be able to fight. And as I do so, let me acknowledge the busloads of migrant Haitians coming into the 18th Congressional District, happily so. People from all over the country are calling the facility to be able to be of help. Why? Because people know the dastardly plight of Haitians. Not that it is not a great heritage, a great country. They fought alongside of us in the Revolutionary War, in case any of you did not know. They have always been our allies. But they're now in a critical collapse. Assassination of their leader, the horrific earthquake, 800,000 displaced, and violence in the streets. Good people that need help. And so we must be at that point of helping. And let me say these points in terms of what we hope that we will see. First of all, the Haitians should be defined as stateless persons. Many of them have not been to Haiti in a decade. They've been in South and Central America. We thank them for that opportunity, but there's a collapse that has caused many of them to flee. In fleeing, one can question whether they can go back to those countries that are not their home countries. One has to determine whether or not you can go back to a country like Haiti that is in a collapse. And so what does this mean? It means that they can be declared stateless and that we can provide the State Department and others to craft a more humane and responsive action for them. In addition, a relic, Title 42, exists. It is a relic of the Trump administration. It was created to be mean-spirited. It was created to give those who are riding on horses the comfort, I can do this. And who are these people? I've never seen this massive numbers of people of dark skins coming across the border in this number. Have to understand these crises meet people in their place. And so the border has been safeguarded by Border Patrol and CBP and treating people in a right way. In this instance, actions by some created the narrative that is hurting these people who are just fighting for justice. Title 43, I asked for a suspension of it. It is discretionary. It is related to the Centers for Disease Control, and it can be monitored to the extent that what my colleagues have just asked for, the ability for due process and asylum petition to go forward. Let us create a safe and legal way for families and those who are elderly and those who are frightened and afraid of violence. Let us create that way that we can handle this. I know America can do it. Don't take the narrative of those who want to demean all of us that came from somewhere else. Don't demean the value of America, which is we take the forlorn, the worn, the oppressed. The Statue of Liberty has never bent her head. She still stands. And so we as a Congressional Black Caucus and all of our allies, we're so grateful for you because this crosses racial lines. We are standing here with a rainbow of people. We will not tolerate it anymore. And we know we can work with this administration because there's a caring heart there. Let's do the right thing and let's begin to move Haitians in a way that stateless people are treated around the world, and let us suspend the moratorium, suspend the deportation by putting a moratorium on Title 42. Congress listens to the Congressional Black Caucus. We are the conscience of the Congress for Black Americans and for those Black people and others around the world.
Thank you so much, Sheila. We have been joined by another co-chair of the Caribbean Caucus. I want to ask Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett to bring her remarks at this time.
Thank you to so many of you who have gathered here, so many who are concerned about the people of Haiti, about the people of the Caribbean. Thank you to co-chairs of the Caribbean Caucus that are here with us, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. I'm also grateful to have the Congressional Black Caucus, as well as, could turn it up a little bit. Sheila, you were kind of a little short there.
I am that.
As well as members of the Hispanic Caucus and other members of the Democratic Caucus who stand in solidarity with us. The Haitian Caucus members who have been formed to support the people of Haiti. As a member of Congress who represents the Virgin Islands, I'm the only member who represents the English-speaking Caribbean, it sits within the Caribbean. The plight of my Haitian brothers and sisters, not just the ones presently enduring egregious and unfair treatment at the U.S.-Mexico border, but our brothers and sisters in the nation of Haiti. It's deeply troubling to me what's happening. The crisis unfolding before our eyes at the border is woefully symbolic of our nation's consistent and superficial response to the reoccurring calamities in Haiti and the Caribbean in general. This is an inflection point and a time for us to rethink how we have our relationship with the Caribbean. The Caribbean cannot continue to be an afterthought. These were individuals, as my great colleague, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee said, not only fought with us in the American Revolution, but gained their freedom through their own violent overthrow and then had to pay for that freedom. Until the 1940s, they were paying to the tune of what is now over $2 billion to the country of France. We need to ensure that not only the United States, but France continues to be a part of what's happening there. As we watch our fellow human beings seeking a better life, we need to ask ourselves, do they not deserve dignity of listening to their story, understanding their desperation, and working to find sustainable, long-term solutions to their problems that cause tens of thousands of people to leave their country, live in poverty and hostility in South America, and make the dangerous trek to try and come to America. I believe our Haitian neighbors deserve that, and that we owe them that, in the same way that we owe those other individuals that have helped us along the way. America has significant trade agreements and economic support with its neighbors to the north and the south, Canada and Mexico. But when it comes to the Caribbean nations, they are thought of afterwards. I'm grateful that this administration has put almost $5 billion available to the people of Haiti for their rebuilding after the earthquakes, that we were the first there after the earthquakes. We were the first there to create a special envoy after the assassination, but we have got to think much more long-term. We cannot just continue to think about when it's a desperate situation. We have got to rebuild that which has been taken away. And I think that America is strong enough to do that. It's a well-researched fact, additionally, that our support for them in vaccinations, support for trade, educational and alternative energy partnerships will go a long way. Infrastructure investment to stave off the influx of cheap China support that they're giving them. The Chinese, as Yvette, others will tell you, Congresswoman Clarke and others, are flooding the Caribbean with cheap and egregious usury investments in those countries. And America needs to stand firm to our neighbors to the south. That is our third border. That has been said by other presidents, and we need to make it so that it is safe for them to be home. I'm sure the Haitian people do not want to leave their home. Many of them are college graduates, many of them who have done trades. They just want a better life. They wish they could do it in their own home, but they can't. Many we know have not been home in 10 years. There are some children who have never seen Haiti in their life. We have got to be better. We know that America is better, and the Congressional Black Caucus, the members of the Hispanic Caucus, the Democratic Caucus, and the Caribbean Caucus and the Haitian Caucus are here to insist that it happen. And we are grateful that we have had the ear of this administration, that they've been willing to listen, to get our support, and be involved with the grassroots civil society in Haiti to make it so. At this time, I want to bring to the mic Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence, who is an officer, the second vice chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. And I want to thank you all for being here in this inclement weather we're experiencing right now.
Thank you so much. I cannot be silent over the horrific treatment of my black-skinned Haitian immigrants in Del Rio. Watching the video reminded me, it put my stomach in knots, of the stories of history, the vivid pictures that show how black people were treated differently, inhumane, and to see horses herding and whipping at black people in America. It's not lost on me that I sit on the House Appropriations Committee, and on that committee, we allocate funds to our border control to implement a plan. May I share? Implement a plan to protect and have humanity and compassion for those who seek asylum in our country. This inhumane actions must stop immediately. I appreciate the administration saying we're going to investigate, but I don't want another picture of human beings being treated like animals just because of the color of their skin. When the children were locked up at the border, all of us who are standing here today, we said, stop it, release these children and treat them humanely. The compassion and the values of the United States does not stop just because of the color of the skin. The crying out loud, we're talking about human beings. We're talking about the values of America. We're talking about the compassion that we want to see every day. As a member of the Black Caucus, I will not be silent. As a member of Congress, I will not be silent. As a black woman in America, I will not be silent. This must stop.
Thank you very much.
And now I'm going to bring to the mic Nanette Berrigan, my Congresswoman from California.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus stands firm with our brothers and sisters of the Congressional Black Caucus to make sure we're speaking out and saying this is not right, it's intolerable, and we will not put up with it. Seeing the images, the despicable images of humans treated as cattle and rounded up as cattle is wrong. And we need to hold those accountable, whoever is in the White House. We need to speak up, and we need to say this is not right. Just today, the Committee on Homeland Security had a hearing with the Secretary to make sure we expressed our concerns and our outrage over what has happened. But we can't stop there. We need to continue to push the policies that are going to change this from happening. Let's remember that our Haitian brothers and sisters can't go to a port of entry and claim asylum right now because the policies have still not been undone to allow that to happen. And that is legal, and it's allowed under our immigration laws, and it needs to happen again so that people don't feel the need to have to go between ports of entry. But as my colleagues have pointed out, Title 42, something I also spoke to the Secretary about today. We have hundreds of thousands of people crossing the border every single day. Why treat asylum seekers differently? It's a discriminatory practice that's anti-immigrant, and we need to end it. And so today I implored the Secretary to end this practice, to stop hiding behind the wall of public health, because we know there are vaccines, and we know that they have allowed in the past for immigrants to get vaccines to come to this country. It's done currently. And so the Hispanic Caucus stands strongly with our brothers and sisters. We are going to continue to push until somebody is held accountable and that this does not happen again. And with that, I would like to introduce my colleague from California, Barbara Lee.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let me thank you, our chairwoman, Yvette Clarke, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, our task force, and all of you for being here today. And first of all, Let me just say a couple of things within context of the violation of international human rights. This week, the United Nations is meeting in New York. Can you imagine? Can you imagine what the world is seeing and thinking about our own country? Can you imagine the violation of human rights that has taken place down at the border against black people, against black Haitians? This is untenable. This is, again, everyone has laid out how despicable this is. It's cruel, it's unusual punishment, and those who have engaged in this whipping of people on horseback need to be held accountable. And Congresswoman Waters, you know who pays for this? It's the U.S. taxpayer who pays for this. So we demand that this stop, and we told, and I was in the meeting in the White House earlier, and we, in very clear terms, told the administration that this needs to stop. Also, we need to stop these deportations now, today. Not one more flight needs to go into Haiti. We know what is taking place in Haiti. We don't even have the humanitarian efforts taking place. I mean, we're deporting people to a country that most do not know. We're deporting people with nothing. They're landing in Haiti, and I serve as chair of the Appropriations Subcommittee that funds our humanitarian assistance and much of what we're talking about, along with our Homeland Security Subcommittee. We have to have food and water, a place to sleep, housing, sanitation. We're sending people back with nothing. They're roaming the country. They're stateless. Also, here at the border in Del Rio, why aren't we at least putting tents there, bringing food, bringing water? They're living in squalor. And so we need to make sure that this administration brings forth, and I suggested this earlier, we need to do a supplemental just on the humanitarian issues, on the funding, on the money. We need to do that because these are human beings who deserve due process. They deserve to be part of the asylum system. And believe you me, because they're black, the rest of the world is looking at America now from the United Nations and saying, what in the world is taking place in a country that is supposed to be a country of liberty and justice for all, that upholds the international standards of human rights? And so I just want to thank everybody for being here today, and I want to thank everyone for supporting all of these efforts. But we have got to say, stop these deportations, and let's get these cowboys, as Congresswoman Waters said, let's get them out of the way. They never need to be on horseback ever again at any border in this country. So now I would like to bring forth I call her my Congresswoman from El Paso, Texas, where I was born, in a border city, and I have visited the border with Congresswoman Escobar, Congresswoman Veronica Escobar from El Paso, Texas.
Thank you, Barbara. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Buenas tardes. Thank you all so much for being here. And I am here along with my comadre, Sylvia Garcia, and my sister also from Houston, the Texas women, in solidarity, a cross-caucus solidarity, as we call out to the administration and demand the end of Title 42 and the restoration of dignity for vulnerable migrants, all vulnerable migrants. I represent a community that long has opened up her arms to the most vulnerable migrants arriving at our nation's front door. From Central American refugees and asylum seekers to Afghan refugees who are being cared for on our military installation, to now Haitian asylum seekers. But many of these individuals, with the exception of Afghan refugees, are being flown back, many to countries they have not lived in or do not know, as part of rapid expulsion, a policy that began under the Trump administration and has been used to this day, continues to be used on thousands upon thousands of migrants who are seeking refuge in our country. It is my hope that what the American public is seeing here today, the unity across multiple caucuses, the demand for justice and dignity for human beings in need of our help, I hope this serves as a wake-up call for a country that for too long has chosen to ignore the fact that we are a nation of immigrants. We are a nation of refugees. It is who we are. Congress needs to expand. Congress needs to expand legal avenues for migrants and restore the use of asylum at our nation's front door, including our ports of entry. And the administration needs to hold accountable and have a zero-tolerance policy for those who abuse the dignity of migrants. And I will tell you, my community is no stranger to the inhumanity and the indignities brought upon not just migrants and refugees, but against border communities. Today, right now, I am asking both the Congressional Black Caucus, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and all caucuses to co-sponsor, support, and endorse a bill that we passed last Congress, a DHS accountability and oversight bill that we passed last Congress that I have introduced again to bring transparency, oversight, and accountability over an agency that is out of control. The second piece of legislation that I'm asking my colleagues to co-sponsor and support, we will be introducing soon, that will restore humanity and dignity to the processing of migrants. We can do this. We are the greatest country in the world, and we do not have to surrender our humanity at any point, anytime, anywhere. I stand with you all in unity, and I'd like to introduce my colleague, the newest member of the House Judiciary Committee in the Congress, Representative Mondaire Jones.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be introduced by a leader for our time, the incredible Veronica Escobar of the great state of Texas. I also want to acknowledge that we were joined earlier by one of my co-chairs of the LGBTQ Equality Caucus, David Cicilline. I'm also a co-chair. We know that human rights are human rights, and we have the Tri-Caucus here and members of other caucuses who likewise understand that we must do right by everybody, and we must live up to our highest ideals as a nation of immigrants. As you heard from so many of my colleagues today, the situation unfolding at the southern border is indeed a humanitarian crisis. The unfathomable cruelty that Border Patrol officers are inflicting on people attempting simply to exercise their legal right to asylum, the vast majority of whom are black and brown, is horrifying and flies in the face of our values as Americans. But the fact is, this crisis is indicative of the cruelty of our deeply broken and unjust immigration and refugee systems. Systems that rip families apart, terrorize immigrant communities, and deport folks who have called our nation home for decades to countries that they have never known, including my constituent, Paul Peerless, of the village of Spring Valley. After 4 years of xenophobic rhetoric and policy from the prior administration, the American people elected Joe Biden to restore humanity, dignity, and respect for international human rights law to our immigration system. So far, his presidency has failed to accomplish that. And individuals fleeing war, civil unrest, and natural disaster are suffering the consequences. This is unacceptable, but we here are fighting to change that. Thank you so much, and I want to introduce an incredible leader, Nana Jumfrey, to say a few words. Thank you.
No, I got you.
Thank you.
It's raining, but it can't wash away what has happened. And thank you to everyone that is here. I want to thank you so very much, Congresswoman Clark, for your leadership. We went with Barbara Lee and others to the border in 2019 and spoke to black asylum seekers directly about what they're going through, and we know what's happening with our people. My name is Nana Jumfrey. I'm the executive director of the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, which is the largest racial justice and immigrant rights organization in the country, advocating, educating, organizing for the roughly 10 million black immigrants in this country, our families, and those coming into this country. This administration elevated the pursuit of racial equity as a commitment and a moral imperative enshrined in a presidential executive order. Remember? However, that racial equity has not extended itself to the area of immigration, even though the Department of Homeland Security is not exempt or excluded. So it is frankly disturbing and deeply concerning that we are not seeing the administration doing the work and making the fundamental policy shifts required to be in compliance with its own racial equity executive order. Baji is outraged by the treatment of Haitian migrants and other black asylum seekers at the U.S.-Mexico border under this administration's border policies, many of which have been declared unlawful by its own federal courts. This administration's stated commitment is belied by its reinstatement of Title 42, appeal of federal court decisions decrying the racism of border policies such as metering, and the Department of Homeland Security's actions on the southern border, where mass deportations and expulsions are returning Haitians and other black asylum seekers without even a screening or a hearing back to countries so dangerous that they're giving those countries temporary protective status, as they did with Haiti, and then returning people right back there. We are hard-pressed in the year 2021 to find more traumatizing and blatantly racist images than those coming out of Del Rio area. White and white-presenting men on horseback with lariats, chasing, yelling, and cursing at vulnerable black asylum seekers who have for weeks and months been resolutely traveling towards what they thought was safety of the United States. The actions of these Border Patrol officers are completely unacceptable and show an indifference to the humanity of black people. This administration must extend humanitarian relief in the form of humanitarian parole and asylum to the black asylum. They don't need Cheetos, they don't need hot dogs, they don't need juice boxes. They need freedom. They need freedom, and this administration can do it today. They need to give humanitarian parole. They need to process people's asylum claims. They need to stop the deportations. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Nana. Well, you've heard from the wide range of Democrats on Capitol Hill, and I thank you for your indulgence in all of this rain. As you can see, the matter of the Haitian refugee crisis on the southern border is a major concern for our communities. I'd like to acknowledge that we've been joined by many colleagues, but two have remained here in the rain, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar of Minnesota and Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib of Michigan. I thank them. When we spoke to them on the floor, they were ready. And so are so many of our colleagues. I want to ask any of the press who are still here present whether you have any questions. I think the demands of the members have been heard loud and clear, but I'm sure there are a few questions. Yes. Yes.
Okay, so what was the response to
Yes. We met with members of the administration in the executive offices of the White House early this morning. They understood that what we'd all witnessed was horrific and that it was not in keeping with what this administration has purported itself to be. They understood that the battle is not against the Haitian American people, but against a bureaucracy that needs to accommodate the numbers of folks who were coming to the U.S. and presenting themselves peacefully as refugees seeking asylum. They also recognize that there must be a public accounting of those officers who were photographed beating, chasing down on horses Haitian refugees. They also recognize that there's a challenge right now with respect to Haiti and the fact that the nation itself is not really in a posture where it can manage its own affairs, let alone the constant deportation and flights that are coming in. And so there was a recognition of all of that. We left a number of issues with them that they will respond back to the Congressional Black Caucus on, but immediately we have asked for the stopping of deportation, the processing of the families, and that there be a public accounting of the behavior of the Border Patrol and what has happened. No, it was not an appropriate response, and we magnified that today in no uncertain terms. I think this administration will be back at the drawing board. I cannot say unequivocally that it will end, but they understand that it's not just a matter of the members of Congress at this stage, but of a nation who is outraged by what they see as disparate treatment between certain immigrants coming from different regions of the world. We have embraced the fact that we wanted our Afghan partners here. They're refugees. We are now asking that our Haitian partners also be given the same level of support as they present themselves and respect. Sure.
May I just add something to your question very briefly? Let us distinguish the Haitian migrants at this time. It is not even the migrants of 10 years ago with the 2010 earthquake or more. It is individuals, many of them, who left 10 years ago, who came to other countries. We thank those countries at that time for welcoming them. But things economically and otherwise collapsed. This is a perfect definition of stateless. And that means that they should be in a separate category, refugees, really under State Department jurisdiction, because their home country is a country they cannot return to. They have not been there for a decade. And the country from which they have come, they are not citizens of. You're not sending them back. You're not sending them as Guatemalans or Ecuadorians. And we thank all of those countries. And so that is why the Congressional Black Caucus, with all of our allies, believe that we have the higher ground, if you will, for a humanitarian approach of due process for asylum petitions, and also taking in, as they have been doing, families with children. And we must take note of the money that has been given from this administration to Haiti in its recovery of the earthquake. But the point is, the American people, I believe, are with the Haitian people, not with violent acts and acts that take us back centuries. And so I think we're going to be seeing us moving forward with the administration.
Let me thank you all for coming today and for enduring the inclement weather with us. As you can see, this is a very passionate and important issue, and we expect to see results from the Biden administration. We have made it clear to them that humanity is at the heart of every policy that we will pass here in the House of Representatives, and that we expect to be modeled by the Biden administration. Everyone, have a great day. Thank you for joining us.